Hello and welcome to the first Business Jam Live for a week or two. Well, a Business Jam Live with live guests, that is. So nice. Well, I'll say it, nice to see you, but I can't see who's out there. But if you have any questions or comments, you can, whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, or LinkedIn, please put your comments there, and I can see them, and we'll take them on board. Or if they're questions, we'll try to answer them. So it's probably time to introduce our guest, because he'll all be champing at the bit, I'm sure. So my guest today, who is he? Well, he created the Idea Factory. If you're on LinkedIn, you may very well have seen that. He created the Idea Factory to help people and organizations develop and grow their innovation skills and their innovation capacity in order to get, obviously, innovative results. If you search for him, you will find many books, hundreds of articles, and he is also the creator stroke inventor of the Navigator guides, which have sold over 60,000 copies, which is quite a lot, I'm sure you agree. He's now based in Canada, but he's gone there via New Zealand and Australia. So please welcome today's guest, Ed Bernacki. Hello, Ed.
Well, hello, Derek. Thanks very much.
Yeah, I just before we start, I ought to have mentioned the audio issue. If anybody says that there are any audio issues with volume or whatever, please do let us know, and we can do something about it. We can knock off early and do it again, or enhance the audio for next week's replay. So anyway, Ed, here we are finally.
Well,
So
thank you.
how did you get to doing what you're doing?
Oh, wow. I think I was always the idea guy right from my very, very first job. I didn't really understand it there. I could look at almost anything. I was working at a nonprofit in Canada, actually, with the Sports Association, the Soccer Association. And that was my first degree, was actually in sports management. I loved it, this whole on-field thing. We're running programs. But I was just really good at coming up with new ways for, this is the way we did it last year. Well, how about we do it next year like this? I think just over a number of years, I realized I was really good at this. But then you start realizing that you're kind of on the outside of things, like sometimes the person with the ideas it's not always appreciated. You can upset people by coming up with new and better ways to do it when you forget that they may have come up with the old way. So that all kind of led into me deciding to go back to university. And that's how I thought there was an executive MBA program. I decided to go there for a whole new experience. But I focused then quite a bit on service innovation. I really had no particular interest in product development, but I was really interested in how service organizations, right from the nonprofit world to the professional services, because I also spent years working with KPMG in Canada, and then the public service. I ended up then working with New Zealand Post in very much what we probably call today an innovation team, but we just didn't use that language then. It was all to do with finding improvements to internal services and external services. So this overview kind of started to realize that this ability to come up with new ideas whenever we need them and wherever we need them, I just thought all organizations need to do that, but I'm not sure they know how to do that. And that's kind of what started my whole process around that all organizations need to be an idea factory. So I started doing a lot of research, a lot of kind of writing about this, studying of all kinds of aspects of it. And I think that kind of developed this kind of expertise I developed working in different countries. But it was much driven on, I think my real interest is to build the skills and capacity of people to be more innovative in their thinking and their work, their results. What skills are needed, what perspective needed, how do we harness different styles of thinking? Like, we know people don't think alike, how do we use that diversity? So it's a long story. I explored all these different areas of this work. So does that give some background?
I think that's more than enough, and you've quite cleverly touched on some of the things that we said we'd talk about today. The first one is one of the words in the title, innovationalism, which is, you mentioned the fact that being the one who comes up with the ideas can make you unpopular, but you have to sometimes say the things that need to be said.
Yeah.
And I hadn't thought about that before until you mentioned that the other day, that like any other sort of ism, whether it's socialism or any sort of fundamentalism, that the people who are advocating this are in fact speaking out and hence potentially unpopular.
Yeah. Well, I think this notion of being an innovationalist, I have to say, I was kind of inspired by David Suzuki, quite a famous Canadian environmentalist. He's not liked by a lot of people. Other people just love what he does. And that kind of got me thinking about that innovation needs the same kind of roles. Someone who will stand up and say some things that may not be, this work is just mediocre. Like, we can do better than this. Like, that's not a good message. But also to
No.
kind of be a role model, to kind of walk the talk. How do I say this nicely? I think there's a lot of people talk about innovation thinking that's what makes them innovative. Okay. It's what you do that makes you innovate. And this notion about being a role model, part of it is, I think, from the work on problem solving. I read a number of articles that said, well, you can't solve a problem to a problem worth solving. And I've always thought that the people who are good at this work, in fact, aren't just good problem solvers. They're actually good problem finders. They can look at something everybody else has looked at and go, we could probably do this now. So, and I think that the third part of that was that kind of enrolling people that into this notion that all of us can be kind of more innovative, and we can kind of create our own solutions whenever and we need them, no matter what kind of challenges we're facing. That we can bring kind of this capacity to innovate to all kinds of things. And I think for anybody else who's trying to explore this idea, looking at how, say, environmentalists do their thing, I think it's actually quite a good. There's so many parallels. I mean, in fact, that's one of the creativity techniques that you can use is steal insights and ideas from one world and bring them into this one. That I think that's one of the things that the innovation work needs is like to be.
Oh, well, to anybody listening, it would appear that we've lost Ed's network connection. So hopefully he'll manage to get it back. It's saying on my little dashboard here that his network connection has gone. So hopefully he'll come back very shortly. But that is an interesting point as to what Ed was saying about the fact that. Hello, Ed. I was just explaining that you had disappeared.
Okay, because I'm not sure if that's at my end or there's some technical issues here.
It's somewhere between you and the Restream server. So yeah.
Sorry about that. I'm not. I think you probably got most of that message.
Indeed. I was just actually thinking about the importing stuff from elsewhere. There's a very fine line between there's what we in our MBA course used to call creative swiping, which is it's okay to pinch stuff from elsewhere, to what some people, and I hate to say this because one or two people could be listening who are doing it, a lot of particularly academic institutions, but some other companies are just copying it and calling it innovation. They're not
No,
innovating.
yeah,
They're just copying. But
yeah,
if you cherry pick the good stuff and combine it with other stuff and do something else, then why not?
yeah. Well, they're just linked to what you said. There is a technique that I've often used called parallel worlds, and it's in some of the creativity books. It's actually doing what you're suggesting, but in a proper way. I've used this with a whole lot of groups where you look at a domain where your problem is. I'll give it just to make some sense of this. I was working with a girl, and they produce really cool tents, backpacks, and then the CEO, his vision is to inspire people in wilderness, and so the technique is they wanted to inspire and kind of educate people. So we kind of looked and said, well, what other worlds try to inspire and educate world people?
Mm,
And we just made a whole list. And then we picked one, just which was religion. Religion tries to inform and inspire. And then the simple technique was, well, how does religion do that? You know, there was disciples, there's a Bible, there's a church, there's ritual. So the whole technique was, well, what's the equivalent of the Bible for a backpacking company? So, of course, it's
mm,
not about the Bible. It's about, so we kind of created, they could actually market kind of journals that people could take into the wilderness. There could be some poetry or tips in that. That could be designed to fit in
yeah,
special pockets in their coats. You see what I'm getting at here? The disciples
yeah,
suddenly became, who could be the
yeah.
disciples to spread the word? And all of a
Yeah,
sudden they thought of the whole speakers program, not to sell equipment, but to sell the idea of being inspired in the wilderness.
yeah. That's
And
all you
that,
need.
yeah. So you see what I'm getting, but as a technique, and then you just arbitrarily go through all of them. No, they're not all going to be good ideas. You can take
Yeah,
lessons how problems were solved in one world and bring it over, but you have to recreate it. That's the thing.
yeah.
But
The
that's
other
that kind of
technique,
discipline of the techniques, which I think actually is you need that discipline to kind of force a new connection,
yeah,
which is very different to just copying something.
indeed. Because well, with copying, you lose the context, which is everything. The other thing that goes quite nicely with that I've found is I don't know if you come across a technique. Why I learnt it as working with aliens. So you, whatever problem you have, you're effectively showing it to aliens, and the aliens have no idea. You know, they've
Yeah,
just arrived in their spaceship. They don't know that this thing with four legs is a table. They want to know what it does, why
yeah.
it's what it's made of, why, you know, and that's quite nice for stripping away the rubbish and getting to the fundamentals. So,
Oh yeah,
but
yeah,
yeah, there's hundreds of these things.
yeah. Well, that what I think what you've expressed there is I have not heard that one, but that's actually a good setup for it. But it's looking at a problem, and then I often used to use the language around identifying the implicit assumptions here. Like, what did we once assume about this that we've now forgotten about?
Mm,
And I'll tell you a kind of a crazy thing. When I first moved to New Zealand, I had never seen a dual toilet in Canada. Do you know what I'm talking about here?
yeah,
Where,
yeah,
okay, kind of gross, but I'd never seen one. And I thought, oh my God, I just thought, how interesting that how they solved the problem of how do you flush a toilet? Because one of
yeah.
the implicit assumptions, I guess most of North America was each flush has to be the same amount of water. And if you
Mm,
actually think about that, you go, well, actually, no, it doesn't have to be. I
yeah.
just thought, but I'll tell you what, it's kind of a gross story, but people never forget it if you tell it to them. Um,
No, indeed, and of
for
course
everyone listening, you can use that one.
the modern
But it's,
equivalent would be based on artificial intelligence and goodness knows what else.
yeah, well,
But that'd be complete overkill.
yeah, it was just one where this notion of asking all those kind of naive questions to uncover
Yeah.
the assumptions that we forgot about. I almost in any context, that's a really good way to start, like exploration of an issue. Like, so before you start to solve a problem, it's actually a good way to really explore what the problem might be.
Yeah.
So, but anyways, that's most interesting, the alien story.
Yeah, well, there you go. If you're listening, folks, you've learned at least 2 things here today already. So that's quite good. But yeah, I was just thinking just very briefly before we move on about the innovationalism, and I was sort of linking that to, do we actually need somewhere? I'm not sure if we need them inside companies, but inside society somewhere, fundamentalist innovationalists, a sort of innovationalist jihad in some sort of way.
Yeah. That's a really interesting idea. For It's actually, it's fun. I've been thinking about things like this before. For our importance, like that, we know that we have to keep solving problems in better and more sophisticated ways because our challenges are getting bigger. I've always said there should be this kind of, I don't know, government funded, private sector, whatever kind of a capacity that actually looks at how do we improve the quality of collaboration, cross organizing, problem solving, all these tools. What should I know? Like something where this like real hard research is happening. Now, I mean, just to simplify all this, almost as an experiment, I opened up a 1980s Harvard Business Review. How many of these topics are completely relevant today? And there was one on how to design good meetings. You think after 40 years, we would have figured out how to organize really effective meetings. That's where collaboration is supposed to happen. And,
Yeah.
and it's as if that we haven't really found a way to have an idea or a process. 1940, we use it. 50s, it grows. We use it. It's like we forget all this initial work that happened. I think we may have talked about this. Some of the early work by Alex Bourne in the 1950s when he wrote his book, that kind of articulated brainstorming. I really wanted to understand that original context. And when I read his book, I realized that it's a 300-page book. He doesn't even introduce brainstorming as kind of a group technique until page 280. The first, 279 pages were effectively how to think more creatively to solve problems, offering all kinds of processes, insights. I had no idea because all I ever knew about brainstorming was something about, getting to and coming up with ideas. A lot of he would have said in the 50s that you brainstorm with people once they have these, they access these tools and they had a process involved. We sort of lost a lot of those ideas, or then, and then 20 years later, we keep reinventing them. So I'll go back to your whole story about a place where this kind of research happens. I think that is really interesting. To kind of, I know that there's different groups like in the UK, Nesta. I mean, I think they do like that. But I think I think it's a really brilliant idea. And I've also wondered how we could make it normal that all organizations, whether you're a profit or you're public service or private sector, how you would have, like, make it normal to have something like an innovation strategy. So we have HR, we have marketing, we have that. Now, a lot of organizations do, but how do we make that a normal thing to, one, build the skills staff to be innovative, to really studying where to focus those skills, be able to kind of produce organizational results. Some could be improving internal services, and some could be on new product sources. I'd like to hope soon that notion of having someone who handles that role would be just as normal as having a training manager, an HR manager. This. I don't know what your experiences are like that.
Yeah, there are people who have those names, but they're not maybe doing what we think they should do.
Yeah.
But I do wonder if it should sort of be not quite split into two, but divided, because there's the things that companies and organizations need to do every day.
Yeah.
And then there's the stuff where people need to learn about, they need to develop brand new stuff, ways of thinking that haven't even been thought about, which will be expensive for organizations to. And this is what universities would say they should be doing, but they're interested in publishing papers and doing research to earn money. So, I mean, I know, I don't know, you probably have them, innovation centers of excellence and things like that, which a little bit iffy because some of them just turn into sort of business incubators. But I've just got this vision in my head, maybe of a nice big pyramid building somewhere where innovation stuff happens, but people from all over the world, or Europe or America or whatever, can just turn up and immerse themselves in it and go away and take it back. And it would be a lot cheaper. Be a lot cheaper for the companies. They could effectively come together, learn the tools, and then go away and use the tools. So they wouldn't actually be having to give away secrets.
Well, yeah, that's right. When you're talking about using the best tools, you still have to use them to create value. This is like the mechanics
indeed.
tools, the whoever's tools that they're that doesn't mean that they're going to do. If you're a great mechanic, you need tools. You still need skills to use those tools.
Indeed.
I love this idea, and I totally on the this notion of like two levels, because I think it would. I think it very much works at that level. This kind of pure, let's call it the pure innovation, rethinking core models, the big things, reinventing both how we collaborate and reinventing systems and services for the future. Like this is around, taking a term look to see that our problems are probably going to be more complex in the future. The other half around this, how do we develop the capacity of our organizations to solve
Indeed.
more difficult challenges? And that is now there's so many. I mean, there's so many links to this. Now, one area that if you do look at it, I mean, I've spent a lot of time working in governments, in public service. In others, there is the OECD Observatory of Public Service Innovation, and they are in some ways trying to do what you said across public service. They do studies. They champion in kind of a lot of ways of like new models of thinking. People are encouraged to contribute from Estonia and virtually you name the country, they're part of it, because governments around the world have been kind of working on innovation projects for at least 25 years. And South Africa has a Center for Public Service Innovation from about 2005. Singapore, I was involved in some projects to launch an innovation skills and capacity building program. That was 2002. So some of this has been done a long time. But again, it's in terms of the public service, they're trying to create resources that countries can just learn from, so they don't have to start from the beginning. Now, kind of moving to your point, you can easily see that model for nonprofits and associations. Slightly different issue, service sector, but this other one, how do we make the corporations and companies kind of more innovative? But it's not just about inventing new products to sell more, but they've also, there's a role that our corporate sector has to meet to kind of the future challenges. Global warming. How do we produce products that have less garbage? All these kinds of things. But I love this idea, though, well, let me just summarize this. I think it was maybe 22 years ago or something. I read a paper by Henley and PricewaterhouseCoopers on a they're seeking to understand what makes innovative organizations innovative. You think by now we could answer that question definitively? I should be reading the articles that have kind of definitive. Here's the 10 things that have been thoroughly researched in all sectors. That this is what organizations need to be more innovative. I haven't done a research, and I did want that could be one of the products of this model that you're talking about.
Indeed.
That's something
what we need to do. Sorry, carry on.
No, I was going to say is you also need part of that job would be to deconstruct and debunk some of the quasi research. Like, I've seen consulting groups do research on innovation, and then you kind of you dig down into who did you sample, and you realize it's their clients that they interviewed.
Yeah.
Well, their clients aren't a sample of. You can't make generalizations from people who are paying you to do work for them. Or some of the academic papers, when you realize that something to do with behavior for innovation or creativity, they're not testing managers and staff and businesses. They're testing students and making sure that it would be this. So it's things like that that I think that we need to kind of distill some of this to be able to summarize to what actually happens. Like I'll just leave this. I'll kind of end it with this thought. But the one thing that did impress me, studied 20 years ago, was when it's how they pick their sample study. And interested in what industry you're in, they just looked at the Times 1000 list, and they just ranked them. They looked at 300 companies, and they ranked them on one factor, which was how much of your revenues come from products and services that you kind of invented over the past 5 years. So that was kind of thought of as an indicator. Yeah. We saw a need, we did something to fill that need, it worked, and we profited by doing that. Now that was a really interesting way to do it. Very, very few studies I've ever seen in this space you kind of qualify people to be studied. Linking to this, I once expressed this by, if you're trying to understand fitness, how people get, if you ask Olympic athletes, their answer is going to be very different to somebody who walked their dog for 20 minutes a night. Now, both may think they're getting fit, but the difference in the kind of the recommendations will be enormous. How do you distinguish in the business sense the Olympic company that does innovation versus the company that does some brainstorming session? They have some posters on the wall. See what I'm getting at here?
Yeah.
It's really hard to qualify. But I think that if they could do that, it'd be absolutely brilliant.
Yeah. What we actually need is I don't know if you come across my metaphor, but I have a metaphor. Colin the chameleon. He's which I use in some of my presentations. So the idea being that an organization needs to be chameleon-like. It should be able to change in advance of things happening automatically without HR. So studying Colin's behavior is probably the thing. I think what we should actually do, if we mention the word jihad and finance together online enough times, then somebody in one of the security agencies will pick it up and wonder what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Well, might get us into trouble.
Yeah.
But
this of innovationalists, someone else told me, gave me kind of another analogy for that. It's like being the court jester. The person that kind of goes, okay, boss, you say you're the boss, but are you actually seeing what's happening here? That they've earned the right to poke at things, if that makes some sense.
Yeah.
To say that you don't say things that are unimportant. When I've had a couple of situations where I've had one boss in particular, who he's one of those people who's, he sounded really good. We met us. He was our director when I was working in his marketing group. He said, "My door is always open to your ideas." I'm not sure they're actually expecting people to actually knock on the door,
No.
but I did have a concept, and I had to go. I was still in finishing BA at the time, and this was like an intern project I was doing then. And in the market, no one was interested, so I had nothing to lose. So I knocked on his door and I said, you mentioned once about you could come in and spend 5 minutes to talk about an idea. And I think he was so shocked that someone did that he just said, okay. Well, we ended up talking for an hour and a half about a concept I had that it was quite different. And he just was so intrigued by it that he actually pulled out a checkbook and said, "Here's a couple. I'm going to write." He basically wrote me a check for $2,000 because he wanted me to, when I went back to university, take that idea and give him 3 or 4 pages of notes on it. That he wanted to file it, and he was one of those. I think one of those really rare people that actually did everything right. He was very open to new ideas. And he actually really liked staff come to him with sort of half ideas because he can build on that. And he said very specifically that he doesn't like this when staff would come to him with the concept all written up, all ready to go, because it's too late to have any input on that. And I just thought that was really interesting. So,
Yeah.
but getting back to the original point, that there's so many insights that I think have been learned over the past few years that I hate the thought that could get lost. I'm seeing this shift now towards everything's now. 20 years ago, we talked about creative thinking, and then now we're talking about design thinking. Pretty much the same concepts.
It's the same thing, but somebody's making money out of publishing the materials and the model.
Yeah. And I think that's where I think I get real kind of concerned about that instead of building this kind of innovation toolkit, we're not doing that. You might, I mean, in particular, like a certain segment of this work, I first was introduced to the Russian tech TRIZ.
Yeah.
Okay, that is a highly specific thing, and I went to some webs, and I thought, this is the kind of tool case that should be standard for engineering. It's brilliant, and I've seen it used. I don't use it. I don't know it well enough to use it, but as a toolkit in this kind of big innovations sort of suitcase or whatever, I hope it doesn't get lost because there's just too much value to be had there. The work on even like saying Edward de Bono, his Six Thinking Hats, Poe, all these books. Very few people know about this work, and I hope that there's some future study of this. You also taught in a university. I taught in a Masters of Innovation program in Australia. It also occurred to me that every commerce and management degree should have what's called innovation.
Well, not just that. I think every degree. I mean, all engineers, everybody should have something. Because I mean, I don't know what sort of buildings you have in Canada, but we're suffering now. Well, I use the word suffering literally from these grey steel structures, grey steel skeletons with cladding put on them, and that's it. And then when you look at the City of London, we got some wonderful buildings. The Gherkin building, there's one that looks like a telephone handset. The Shard. Without that sort of thinking, those buildings would never ever have been created.
No, I you know what, I totally agree. The course that I was part of in Australia, this is at the University of Adelaide. The students were mostly it was a graduate level course. The students were either engineers, different kinds of engineering, or project management. And part of the Masters of Innovation was some of it product development. My end was more the internal build native organization. But you've actually got me thinking about this. I absolutely would agree that even a basic introduction to some of these concepts about create, problem solve, so right at the beginning, problem solving, collaboration, could be really useful in all programs.
I mean, yeah, if you taught them at a sort of foundation level,
Yep.
then it would all the students could actually use that in all of their assignments as well.
I was just about to say what you just said. I was approached by a group of students. There was quite a few Chinese and Asian students in that class, and a number of them came up to me and said, "Well, you don't know that we're using a lot of your lessons in our other classes." And I wasn't sure what he was talking about to start, but he said, like, you taught us how to brainstorm like an idea factory. And well, we're given problems to work on in our other classes and assignments, but they don't teach us how to collaborate.
Yeah.
We just get an assignment. And so he used this thing about like a whole thing I did on collaboration, working with people who don't think like you. When you have a group of people who have to generate ideas, think like an idea factory. I gave him some techniques. I was completely thrilled when he said that they could see application right away to the work. One woman, she was kind of a highly structured analytical engineer. She said that she remembered something I said in the around brainstorming, that I think too many people in the group are starting to think alike. Somebody has to step away from that to kind of challenge them. And she absolutely saw so she became like that thought provocateur, that innovationalist, to kind of just to challenge their thinking. And she said she wouldn't have thought of that before. So I absolutely agree. I totally agree that if students get an inkling of this on how to collaborate more effectively, those skills will stay for years and years. And
even how to question the questions, because I'm thinking some of the university lecturers I've come across in the past, they set these questions for assignments, and they're pretty awful, really. But you could question the questions.
yeah,
That would probably get you into trouble, which is exactly where it got me into trouble at work. But yeah, being that provocateur is. I once went on a course where they, I suppose you call it toys. The company manufactured toys, but they were toys for like executive workshops was what they were for. So you would people would try and project manage teams to make model cranes to go across the room and this sort of thing. And the woman, our project manager, just came along and said to me, "Can you do this?" And I just looked at her and said no. And she thought I was being really, really awkward. Then at the end, she actually came across and she said, "Actually, it never crossed my mind that somebody would say no. I hadn't even crossed her mind that there was more than one possibility," which was
wow.
was quite interesting.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I
I think
always like
that
to prime people to actually literally do the unexpected in workshops sometimes as well, just to see what happens.
yeah. I think you and I have some similarities in our style of thinking, that we tend to probably question
I
things
think
a lot more than a lot of people.
I think we have far too many. Let's mention the word jihad a couple of more times and get ourselves into even more trouble.
Yeah.
So
Well,
actually,
I think
before I forget, I ought
yeah.
to, in case anybody is actually listening, stroke watching, if anybody wants to get in touch with Ed, you can do it there. You can get it. You can visit him on LinkedIn. You can send him a tweet on Twitter. You can look at his website or send him an email. So if you want to learn more about being an innovationalist, terrorist, jihadist, here we go, I got the word jihad in again, then that's how you can contact him. And if you miss all that, there will be a replay on available on YouTube anyway, so you can get it from there then as well. I thought I'd better put that in, otherwise there would have been no point in asking you about them.
Well, that's fine. That's fine. I, you know, you really now got me thinking about how there could be a center. Now, I don't want to use the word in a building, but somewhere that we could pull all this knowledge together. And
Yeah, so
I
it's
don't know
not.
what that is.
It might be. It might
It
even be a cloud.
yeah. It's just things that there's so much useful knowledge that has been created in this space. The idea that we're starting again with every new generation, that instead of, like they say,
Yeah,
that notion about of standing on the shoulders of the generation before you, well, it's more like we're starting over again and again
yeah.
and
I think.
again.
I think that's the problem. People write new books. They come up with new programs to make money, but it's not. It's not really furthering the cause.
Yeah, and then I think I may have mentioned one too before that sometimes I've read a few things that suddenly make me realize just how bad we are at this. Was I was very interested in the design of meetings and conferences and how we can not just bring people together to learn, but if you have all those people in the room, that means you have a lot of brain power. We should be harnessing that brain power. And I thought I was doing all this. I wrote a book on this 15 years ago, thinking I was leading edge. And then I discovered a book written in 1945 called Conference Leadership, where it articulates all these processes for people to come together to confer. And I'm thinking, I never even thought of the notion of conferring as being a conference. And
Yeah,
that one book laid out um, years later, open space technology. Owen Harris, I think his name was. He did, they actually they didn't have the same language in 45. He talked about that product development sessions, solving
yeah,
conflict on a team, and these were well designed. Like, and the tips and the recommendations, including the chapter that just kind of blew me away, was why do you have to get women involved with these processes? You know,
mm,
we would think we may not question that today, but that was so far ahead of the times.
yeah,
And there's a whole chapter on perspectives women that they can bring to something that's unique, and that's why it's absolutely vital that they're part of these conferences to solve issues. So, like I said,
yeah.
there's so much out there
There is.
that, and I don't know how you get that into new minds or just starting out on things, because in my world, we use books, guides, tools, you know, physical things that had lots of words in them and illustrations. When that gets transferred online, is it used? I may look up
Yeah,
something, like some of the work that I did in Singapore. One of the things that people just thought, these innovation guides, I wrote a couple of innovation guides there. They were in really high demand because public servants they were cool. And they would, and just that the physical aesthetic aspect of the journals, the guides, people really liked that, and they wanted to keep
yeah,
it, and they kept them, and they used them for a long time. Now, when things start to go on, it's easy, but I hope it leads to actually to the use
yeah.
of these
I think you need
tools.
to touch. You almost need to touch it. I can remember when I did my MBA, it was with the Open University Business School, and although it was remote learning, the thing we had was every course there was a residential school. You actually, for most subjects, it was basically coming together with people. But
Yeah,
with the creativity, we did some crazy stuff, leaf sculptures,
yeah,
human sculptures, that all obviously designed to change the way of thinking. But that showed people that it could actually be useful.
yeah,
And I think yeah, in innovation, if it was taught in higher education, should be, I don't know what percentage, but part theoretical, where you pick up stuff,
yeah,
and part practical,
yeah,
rather than just all theoretical.
yeah. Well,
So
the other, just if you were teaching it something, This is a distinction that I read that Edward de Bono said, and I just as soon as I first read this, I just thought this is brilliant. That he, I'm going to try to paraphrase this because I won't remember exactly, but he said that one of the problems with the English language is that it doesn't distinguish between like creativity, like artistic creativity, creativity as an idea creativity, the thinking processes, problem
Yeah.
solving. And he said if we make that distinction, we can then go about learning the skills for both. Like he wasn't against artistic
Yeah.
creativity, but this other one about idea creativity. And as soon as he said that, I thought, yep, I get it. That there are two very different concepts. Both need to be really creative.
Yeah.
I think if you worked at both of those levels, there's a lot of crossover in there.
Mm.
But there's also, to learn how to paint, there's actually a fundamental core skill. Like I was lousy at it.
Yeah.
I was really bad as a painter.
I can
Because you
paint
still,
houses, but not pictures.
yeah, because there is a core skill there, mixing, brush use,
Yeah.
all that. It's no different to 8 steps for brains or whatever the
Yeah.
technique. There's
Yeah. You
actually
could use that
there's
all
a
as
discipline
metaphors.
you have to learn.
Yeah.
The desire to be creative and paint must be matched by having basic skills. Having
Yeah. Definitely.
I mean, we don't look at Rembrandt's lousy first paintings. You just see the end ones. Like every artist must have done a lot of bad work when they first started.
Just imagine if you could find Leonardo's first picture.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
That'd be
it might not be impressive, like because all of them had to start somewhere. And, and if it's like with these stars, there's only very few people are like Mozarts of the world who seem to have some gift to
yeah.
write music. Um,
Yeah.
Most people have to kind of learn, and there's so many parallels between the two. But I mean, I'm all for that. That people could learn and explore and kind of pursue what that most interests them, because societies need creative, as in how that could be used in all kinds of different spheres. But we also need this problem solving kind of creativity, idea management, because so much change happens by the ideas are
Yeah.
like the knowledge. It's what creates the value. So I think that's a really interesting idea. I just is this for an Elon Musk to set $100 million aside to create some kind of study, or someone to create
Yeah. Yeah.
something?
I do think you wouldn't need huge amounts of money.
Yeah,
You just need to be full time doing it.
yeah.
It would be, and it would create a resource. So, fingers crossed. Elon Musk has been listening in. Actually, Elon, if you're there, we'll take 50 million. We don't need 100.
Well,
So I think we've just about come to the end of that. We've been talking for ages and ages,
wow.
and we could probably go on for ages and ages as well.
Yeah.
So anyway, it has been a pleasure for everybody listening. I hope you've enjoyed as well.
Yeah.
So we'll say goodbye to Ed. Thanks for coming along and hopefully inspiring some people, educating others, and giving others a kick up the backside. So thank
All
you again,
right.
Ed. I'm sure we will be speaking soon.
All right. Thanks, Sarah. I appreciate it.
Okay,
That was
right.
fun.
Bye bye. Right, so folks, well, that's another one. Thanks very much to Ed for his contribution. If you have any comments, you can still leave them. And I shall see, well, there will be a replay of this next week, and I shall see you again, hopefully, in a couple of weeks' time. Bye for now.